There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America.
A new vision will govern our land.
Our job is not to divide. Our job is to bring people together.
By the people, for the people, and of the people.
Our youth has power.
Border Talks is a video podcast by students in the TAMIU Political Science Association dedicated to exploring the political impact of ever-changing current topics. With an understanding that even the most personal matters can be political, we aim to explore how issues ranging from the most seemingly insignificant, absurd, or serious subject matters can affect our border town through a nonpartisan, student-focused perspective.
As an organization, we recognize the Black Lives Matter movement as addressing a human rights issue. We stand with the victims of police brutality, and it is our hope that projects like these will help inform our fellow students and amplify the importance of having leaders throughout our local, state, and nationwide system to help protect the most vulnerable and marginalized communities in our country.
Hope y'all enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Border Talks. My name is Ceci, and I'm your host, and I'm a student at TAMIU majoring in political science and sociology, and I'm joined here by my co-host.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex. I'm also a political science student at TAMIU. For today's episode, we invited two guests. We invited Alfredo Velasco and Esayas Abush Paulson.
So for our audience, can you guys just introduce yourselves and give us a brief description of who you are and what you do here in the city?
So hi everyone, my name is Alfredo Velasco. I am a member of Red Wing and I'm also a student at TAMIU studying political science. And just a quick introduction into who Red Wing is. We are a multiracial, multi-class organization devoted to putting power back in the hands of the people. So that's just a really quick kind of introduction to who we are.
Hey guys, my name is Esayas Paulson, and been here. I'm from born and raised back home in Ethiopia, Africa. Moved over here about 13 years ago now, and went to school here, middle school, high school, and I'm attending at TAMIU right now. I'm doing kinesiology. About to finish, but yeah.
Awesome.
So we're all brought here today because of an unfortunate event that happened earlier, last month. And the board that it caused around the country and in other countries as well. So just bringing it all together, the death of George Floyd created a spark in the country. I just wanted to ask you guys, I mean, there's been protests like not only here in America, but also in places like Germany and Greece and Japan have seen like some sort of protest as well. What do you think is the universal message that's being conveyed by these protests?
Well, that's good. Thanks for coming and then, putting this whole chat so people can hear us. But all this process and what's going on for the past couple of weeks and months now is not only happening right now, but like it's been happening for over like 400 years about this injustice going on for Black people and other cultures, Hispanics, and all those people. And people had enough. And the death of George Floyd was a big spark for us, not only the community here, but around the world, United States, everywhere. Even back home, Africa, everyone's watching this, and it's really saddening. And that's why a lot of people are standing up, saying it's enough. We don't want this. We don't want police brutality. We don't want this racism been happening. Because at the same time, at the end of the day, we all the same, So we want peace. We want togetherness, to be live, to be not to be afraid. We don't want to be. I don't want to be next, because because of my color. I'm a human, like the cop, the white cop, no matter who it is. So I think because of that, a lot of people standing up saying Black Lives Matter, and I just want to say that a lot of people not arguing that, and it's okay, but at the end of the day, we do care for all the race, of course, that's why we're doing this all together, and we're focusing on Black Lives Matter right now because of what's happening for the past years, and people are saying it's enough. We do understand that, they agree in that, and we're doing that. So
of course. So, Alfredo, what do you feel is the universal message you think is being conveyed here?
Yeah, so I think Sayas put it very well, and I agree with everything he said. At the core of these protests is the demand for the ramification of these unjust systems, of the racial, systemic racism that is integrated into our justice system, into our police systems. And it is this outcry for our humanity more than anything. And the reason why it was the death of George Floyd is because it was so clearly an act of brutality, an act of like dehumanizing a person to the point where you literally kill them over what, a forged $20 bill that you probably didn't even know was fake, right? So that's at the core of these protests, right? And yes, Black Lives Matter. And that is why we are trying here at Red Wing to change things systemically so that no other Black man or no other Hispanic man or whoever it might be in this country is abused, discriminated against, or brutalized by the police any longer.
Yeah, for sure.
Of course. So how do you all feel that systemic racism, specifically here in the United States, has led to the death of George Floyd and many others like Breonna and a lot of other victims of police brutality?
Well, I guess, like I said, it's been going on for years. We can go back to when slavery started here. Not only here, but it started, of course, in Europe, going to Africa, getting, a lot of Black people, just taking them away, taking them more from the kids, from the family, for no rights, and all that kind of stuff. So from there, it came to the United States. But it's been going on for years, and treating like everyone, like all the Black people and different colored people are like animals and stuff like that. So, I mean, we've seen progress from there, but that racism is still like huge, systematic justice, and people are not opening their eyes, not seeing that, and people, a lot of people say there's no racism, there's no nothing like that, but and that carried to not only on Black, like Hispanic, like all those color, race, and not having a job, not giving opportunities, especially and also in schools. You're gonna see a lot of time in the big small schools or in the big small excuse me, my bad. In schools area, you're gonna have a lot of white people successing than a lot of blacks or Hispanics because of the injustice, the system, the way the system works, and stuff like that. But,
yeah, of course. I think that's very well said. Alfredo, did you have anything to add on to that?
Yeah, it's just basically the same kind of idea that from the inception of this nation, the slavitude of African people has been what built the wealth of this nation, right, from the beginning. And it is that discrepancy, right? A specific class, in this case, white slave owners, becoming rich off of the labor of enslaved Black people, that this all starts. And it is that mode of production, that economic basis, that is the most, or has the highest influence over our lives, I believe, or we believe in at Red Wing, right? Because those disparities that were created at the beginning of the nation are still felt today. Because guess what came after enslavement? There came the sharecropping business of the South, where African Americans, after they were freed from enslavement, were still made to work on plantations most of the time without pay, right? Most of the time being indebted for life. And then after that came the immigration from Black Americans into the urban parts of many places in this country. And then what happened? Many rich white folks moved out of the urban areas, created the suburbans, what we now know as suburbs, in order to, again, discriminate against, create the conditions for the failing of minorities in this country. So we have to look at this at the broad historical and material context in order to understand how these systems work. We can no longer kind of hyper focus on specific instances and pretend like it all exists in a vacuum. It all exists continuously within the framework of history and the economy. So yeah.
Well said. Yeah, that's well said, man. Definitely.
And well, shifting gears a little bit here, and looking at how not only the system has failed in terms of protecting marginalized communities, but also in the way that they've dealt with punishing or having consequences for the perpetrators of those violence. We want to just look briefly at what's going on with the officers that are being prosecuted for the death of George Floyd. And I think, Alex, you have the charges that they currently have.
So fortunately, and I don't think it would have happened otherwise if people hadn't made an uproar. Derek Chauvin has been charged with second-degree murder, and the other 3 officers have been charged with aiding and abetting to second-degree murder. And just to clarify for those who don't understand, you have these 3 degrees of murder. Your first degree is premeditated, so someone that was planning on killing somebody that day and had a way to do it. Second degree, which is what Derek has been charged with, is maybe he didn't plan on killing someone that day, but when he got into that situation, he knew what he was doing, and he was in control of whether it was his choice to save or let George Floyd live instead of kill him. And third is manslaughter. So as for now, we do have Derek Chauvin being charged with a second-degree murder.
Right, and so we hear a lot of this talk, especially in the protests, about ACAB and all cops are bad. And so I feel that a lot of that comes from the lack of accountability that we've seen that we have for police officers. So I just want to ask each of you, either one who wants to go first, if you could tell us what you think ACAB means to protesters, given that both of you have participated in protests, and why do you think so many people are saying it?
So the term ACAB and that sentiment is a direct reaction to what you just said, the lack of accountability, the systemic failures of our justice system. So whenever people say ACAB, I just see that as like a symptom of a bigger illness, right? But for us at Red Wing, right, when we look at how we make things better for individuals, how we make the lives less, how do we actually reform police in a way to lessen the brutality, right? We don't target individual police members. We don't look at, well, it's this one person that's the problem. It's this one police officer. No, it's more systemic, because we look at the video of George Floyd's murder, and you see, obviously, I forget his name. I never bothered to learn the name of these murderers, but the police officer who killed him was having his knee on his neck, right? Which is, again, that's the one bad police officer, right? But what were the other police officers doing? Nothing. They were staring. They were standing there. In fact, they were protecting him, because if anyone was trying to maybe help George Floyd, that person would be arrested too. The person would be brutalized too. And so we have to look at, why is it that police officers act in this manner? Why is it that they are kind of organized in this manner? And how can we systemically change that so that police officers, which we all know for the most part are good people, want to protect people, and have hard jobs, how do we make sure that they don't put themselves, or that they're not put in this position, right? And that they do not exacerbate the violence being placed on the civilians by them. So that's how we look at it over here, how we change things actually.
Yeah, that's well said, man. Like, I'm with you exactly like that. And when he said that, like, why are they watching? If one cop is doing that harm to him, he had his knee on his neck for like 8 minutes and 46 seconds for the whole time, saying, a grown-ass man, like, crying for his mom, saying, I can't breathe, and all that kind of stuff. And what they're doing, they're just watching. They're there, like, trying to protect that kind of stuff. And that's not only one. And there's more videos since. That's why I'm so happy about this, like, this technology that we have, And I know, like, in Facebook a couple of days ago, people are talking about they want to stay away from technology. I'm like, no, like, we need this. We need technology, because we're capturing this live. And
Right.
We're seeing cops are not doing anything about it. And then, like, yesterday also too, like, 2 days ago, 76-year-old gentleman, he's just walking by, and one guy just pushed him, and he fell down. And, like, older man, like,
Right.
he doesn't have a lot of strength and stuff. He fell down, he hit his head, and he's bleeding from his ears. Only one cop stood up from others. I think a lot of them, I think 27. One of them trying to go pick him up. One of them just took him away and telling me they just watched him to, like, bleeding, stuff like that. How can we change it systematically, And why is that happening? Why is that nobody's helping when somebody's, asking for their lives, So stuff like that. Also, like you said, it's a good comments on that.
Right, absolutely.
Of that 75-year-old man who was pushed, all he was trying to do is give them back one of their helmets. There's pictures of them trying to give back their helmets, and they literally push him to the ground for no reason. So it's that type of aggression, that type of instant kind of acting on power and anger that's the problem, right? And it's systemic. It's not, we can no longer kind of focus on, well, as long as we punish the bad cops and the rest are fine. It's kind of
no. True.
Right, that
True.
definitely
True. Definitely.
makes a lot of sense. And, you know, looking at things locally, we invited both of you here because you've both participated in organizing local protests. And so, Esayas, you had organized the protest at the Del Mar and McPherson area on Friday. So we just want to know a little bit more of what inspired you to organize this protest and what was your goal?
No, I wasn't even like before a couple of days ago. I wasn't even thinking about protesting here, that kind of stuff, because I wanted to join some of my friend him and other people. They're inviting me to go downtown and stuff, and then I wanted to do that. But I had a friend come up to me, hey man, like let's do it. And I know a lot of people are scared because how social media is saying it's going to be violence and this and this. So I just sat down. I thought about it a lot because I was so angry. I'm so angry about what's going to happen, what's happening. So I sat down. I had a good conversation with a friend of mine. I wanted to do this like peacefully. I want to emphasize on peacefully, and emphasize on not looting, not destroying anything, businesses, because this is what we live. This is our community, and I don't want anything to do that. And if somebody comes with me, and I don't want nobody to be getting hurt because I made this. So it took me, and organization was huge also to me, and I was so in a rush, and I know I put a false time and date, and somebody showed up, so I had a lot of help. They put everything together, and we did it, and I shared it on Facebook, and it went viral, and a lot of people showed up, and literally I was in tears because a lot of people can understand that, and I was with them, and they were together, we were together, and we marched, and one of the big thing was I think also to another one is the cops. I had a conversation with Laredo PD and Tano Trujina, and I told them about I wasn't asking for permission, but I was telling them, hey, this is what I'm gonna do. It's gonna be peacefully, and if I can get support from you guys, from Laredo police officers, please come and join us, especially for trafficking, all that kind of stuff. With the cars, we don't want to be in the way of it. So we did it, and a lot of people showed up, like I said, and it was amazing. It was a good turnout, and I was so happy. Like I couldn't have done it without my community.
Right, it's really beautiful. I think one of the nicest things that we're seeing now with the Black Lives Matter movement, not only across the nation, but locally, it's very rare that we see protests or we see any kind of, upsurge in especially young people's engagement.
Oh man.
So it's really, I think one of the nicer things that we've seen out of all of this is the sense of community that we've all been able to get from this. And I mean, it's the reason why we're talking here today. And so I wanted to ask you, Alfredo, Red Wing, y'all were the organization that really got the ball rolling for people to begin organizing. And I think the organization of the first protest and then the delivery of the demands definitely inspired the community and helped a lot in terms of getting the ball rolling, like I mentioned. So I wanted to ask you the same question. What was y'all's goal in organizing these protests?
Okay, thank you. Yes. So again, it was all born from the incident of George Floyd, and we saw just how much impact it had across the nation. It was kind of literally every single city kind of protesting for George Floyd's death. And so that's where it started. And we began thinking, if we're going to protest, right, if we're going to bring out this energy and this show solidarity, right, we have to actually kind of engage beyond that to get things to change, right? So it's where the list of demands came from. Because, okay, so we're going to organize the protest, people are going to show up, they're going to be excited. We have to show that excitement needs to be, we need to create a vehicle for that excitement to be used to constructively create change. And that was our goal, was to get people excited and then get them to engage by whether it was to attend more protests like the one that Esayas organized, whether it was by joining us in creating things such as mutual aid programs to help out our communities, create bonds and relationships so we can trust one another, and then putting pressure on city council to actually take our demands seriously. So it was an amalgamation of all of that, right? So it was born out of this show of solidarity and show of that Black Lives Mattered. And we wanted to expand it because we felt that if we, and I'm not saying this in any way to critique or disregard Esayas' effort, his labor and his perspectives are valued, and we appreciate it. Like, you have no idea, because with us, seeing other organizers, seeing other protests, it gives us tons of inspiration, tons of hope, because it's like, wow, we're not the only ones that feel this way, right? And we want to give the opportunity, and we want to give the space for people like Esayas and other Black people in our community to speak up and let their voices be heard, and allow them the credit they deserve when it comes to organizing these things. But we didn't want that energy to dissipate, right? We didn't want the death of George Floyd and the protests that came from it to become the news of last month, right? We want that pressure to be constant. We want that pressure to be constant so that change does come, and so that we avoid any more unjust deaths like the one we just witnessed.
I think it's a big credit to both of you, both Red Wing and SAS, and these people who are organizing, because I feel like there's a lot of people who agree on all of these points, but yeah, these voices are the ones that are the least heard. So the fact that you're having all these people go out to the streets and actually just show the numbers of people who actually want to support something good like this is significant. As for myself, I haven't been able to go to a protest because I've been at work like constantly, and I can't get like a day off, but I'm still supporting like as much as I can. And I know there's like hundreds of more people in Laredo that believe the same way that I do, but can't attend these protests.
Yeah, I mean, we want that momentum, we want that energy, we want that kind of inspiration to only grow. We don't want it to die out, because once it dies out, I fear that people who attended these protests are going to feel like their actions meant nothing, right? If nothing comes out of this, if nothing changes, if we don't change the systems, there's going to be apathy. It's why people don't vote, because they feel like their voices aren't being met, right? They feel like their demands aren't being met. And so we just want to cultivate that energy and make sure that it's being focused in changing these systems.
Right, definitely. And I think that the fact that y'all at Red Wing created this list of demands, I was there when y'all were presenting the demands, and there was a lot of TAMIU students that were there, even like Greek associations that showed up. And so it was something that I had never seen. And so for students that haven't gone through the list or haven't really like understood, I just wanted to ask you if you could explain briefly what the purpose of this list of demands is.
Yes, so we at Red Wing came up with our 9 points, our 9 demands that we would like to see City Council actually discuss and try to get through. Our demands were basically, we listened to our community. Before these protests, we were holding various mutual aid programs like our COVID-19 relief program. When COVID-19 hit and many of these lower income, compromised people couldn't go to Walmart or couldn't go to H-E-B, we delivered goods for them, food, medicine, water. And they would tell us stories. They would tell us stories of how they've felt different injustices affect them here in Laredo. And one of those was police brutality. And so we listened to our communities, we listened to our Black voices in the group, we listened to other voices around the country, because we have to forget, Laredo doesn't live in a bubble, right? We live in the context of the rest of America. So any injustice that happens in any place in this country is possible here. And so part of these lists were, part of these demands were kind of acknowledging both what's happening here and outside of our city, so that we can prevent those injustices from happening here. So yeah, I'm gonna list them off really fast. So number 1, we demand a complete audit of all training of Laredo Police Department and Webb County Sheriff offices received for each division without exception. Number 2, we demand a non-city council appointed citizen committee be created to monitor and review police activity, including but not limited to trainings, grants, and internal meetings. Number 3, we demand that officers patrolling locations are kept strictly to the neighborhoods in which they live without exception. Number 4, we demand that local police forces in general and the Webb County Sheriff's Office in particular cease all collaboration with ICE. Number 5, we demand more robust background checks for police force applicants, robust avenue in which women can safely report domestic abuse, and for all officers that receive use of force complaints to be terminated. Number 6, we demand a complete dismantling of the police union. Number 7, and we demand number 7 is basically we demand the police budget to be highly reduced and reinvest those funds back into the community through public libraries, public clinics, infrastructure, things that are actually going to materially make the lives better of Laredo citizens. So those are our 7 demands, just kind of like a quick summary of each one.
Right. I think they're definitely very interesting to hear, because I feel that, especially when you look at comments and all of those things, I at least read some that were like demand? How could you demand something of your city? And I think that in Laredo, and even as young people and students, it can be hard for us to remember that City Hall and the city overall belongs to us. So if someone wants to go and demand something, it is well within their right to do so. So I applaud you all for taking that step. And Esayas, I wanted to ask you how you feel about Red Wings demands, and given that you organized a protest, do you think that these are demands that could help?
Yes, yes. Oh, definitely, man. Thank you. I still I'm still learning a lot about them, and then I want to learn more about with them, and then connect with them. And I really understand that the commands needs to be heard a lot and spread through the city and stuff, and they need to see it, and it can really help a lot, especially like you said, like in the beginning, how helping a lot of people who couldn't support themselves during this time because they lost their job or their elder and stuff like that, helping out, stepping away from your house and just go, doing that kind of stuff, and really good. And yes, it does need a lot of demand on that.
Right. And so I mentioned the comment section, and I'm sure some of y'all have seen some of the comments. And so I wanted to ask you both, either like if personally or as Red Wing or as just like an organizer of a protest, what you think that these comments are reflecting in terms of what the comments are saying about like our community.
Right. So I know it's very easy and it's very cathartic to look at those comments and then immediately start like arguing or immediately start like kind of pointing at them and going, hey, you guys are living in a bubble, you guys are ignorant, you guys are stupid. Our goal here isn't to do that. It isn't to kind of demean our community. It's to engage with it. And so, yes, those comments, a lot of them are very ignorant and they're very kind of frustrating because we understand kind of like, well, we understand why these things are happening, and they seem to kind of point towards like it's not happening here, so why are we worrying about it? It's not like, this or the other. I think that it's a symptom of just anytime there's injustice in a society, a majority of people are going to not look at it, or they're going to ignore it, or they're going to justify it in some sense, because most people belong to the status quo. We're integrated into the systems we live under. So they just, most of the time, either don't see it, are too busy in their personal lives to engage with it, or just not educated in that sense, right? And with Red Wing, what we want to do is engage with them, listen to them, and then have a conversation so that we can not only educate our community, but educate ourselves, right? There's never a point where we feel that our knowledge or our kind of consciousness is high enough. There's always more things we can learn. We can always be more in tune with our community. And so that's what we're looking to do here. So I look at those comments, and while it's frustrating, I believe that once we show that our actions and our organizing and our kind of efforts will bring about change, those people will no longer have those doubts. Those people will no longer have that kind of mentality, especially if it's their kids kind of getting involved and getting those things done. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Again, that's how I and we at Red Wing kind of see those comments.
Oh man, yeah, I completely understand with you, man. Especially me, since I started doing that, and I've seen a lot of comments really just like broke my heart, especially like the closest one, your friends or family members also too, and when they're commenting out there and they're just arguing, I'm just like, like stuff like that really hurts. But I think like you said, it's lack of education, huge, especially, and here, how can we educate them? How can we educate ourselves? Like you said, and the big thing is, like you said also too, like let's sit down, let's talk about it. If you don't agree, and if I don't agree, how can we bring like our both thoughts in the middle, and then just meet, and then let's understand each other and stuff like that, And it's a lot of like communication and stuff like that, and it's really hurts. Like just reading those comments and stuff like that.
But you know what? Beyond those comments, I see a lot of positivity. I see a lot of people look at what we're doing and kind of gain inspiration, and that to me inspires me because it lets me know there's people who not only agree but are willing to engage. And so those are the comments that I look to. Those are the people who I look to, who continue to give us inspiration, hope, and the mental kind of stability to keep going, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's I think that's huge also too. Like, it made me also want to do this more because all the people are commenting, saying a lot of good things. And when they saw, like, I know like a lot of people didn't like what I'm gonna do, because they heard a lot of false information saying it's gonna be violence and stuff like that. So they saw the video, like they're texting me, they're calling me, the people who I love, they said I'm sorry, and this, because they understood, they see the message, and they see a lot of people are getting engaged and stuff like that. So that's also another very encouragement that we see.
Right. And I think that given that we do live in sort of what people like to call the Laredo bubble, and we're overwhelmingly a Hispanic population, it can be difficult for people to understand that, especially when they're not a Black person or they're non-Black Latinx people. And so I think that a lot of those comments come from, like y'all mentioned, a lack of education. And I don't mean that in a way of like, oh, like educational, like elitism. I think it's uncomfortable to talk about racism. It's uncomfortable to acknowledge, hey, maybe my grandma, who I love dearly, is saying and perpetuating racist things. I think it's difficult to confront, especially given that we live in a bubble where it's feels like we don't really see it. But Esayas, you are a Black man, and so I want to ask you if you've ever had any experiences here in Laredo as far as experiencing racism or any kind of negative talk about you just for the fact that you're a Black man.
Yeah, definitely a lot. Yeah, and when I came over here 13 years ago, I was like 12 years old. So as soon as I came in, I didn't speak any English or Spanish, so that was hard for me. And I was already a teenager, so it took me about a year to learn English and Spanish also too. So it was very hard, like to learn one thing and then like that. So it was really like I got it was really awesome because I learned both languages, at the same time, and I got adapted to the culture, how it is in Laredo, and then yes, I have a lot of people, especially in schools, if I say any comments when I played football, and a lot of people here that keep telling me with the N word, go back to Africa, go back to where you come from, stuff like that. I lived through it, and my dad is very influential in my life. And one of the big things he said is, okay, it's not okay, but he stood up for me. I remember in school, my dad had a talk with his parents about it, and those parents got mad at us, like saying a lot of different things. So that's why too, like now I'm thinking about it, like it's just a lot of lack of education, not in a bad way, but it's just we never. Also here, one of the big things I want to talk about is like school, school wise, that kind of stuff. So I went to middle school and high school, and we talked about slavery, but we never talked about like straight up like, okay, this is this. And I think we just touched like little things, and we skipped it. So we're skipping a lot of stuff like that. That's why we don't have a lot of education, like lack of education. Also to in colleges, also to here. So how can we bring that, and then how can we talk about it? Not only like African American studies, but Hispanics. Like I want to learn. Like, I'm learning a lot, but like I want to learn depth. And how can we do that? How can we bring that kind of stuff? So it's just it's pretty tough.
Absolutely. And I thank you for sharing your experiences. We definitely think that it's important to amplify Black voices, especially in Laredo, because, there's even comments I've read that say like, oh, well, they don't even live here. And I think it's really unfortunate. But like you mentioned, it comes from a place of just a lack of understanding of the topic and the situation. And I mean, I remember even when I was in high school, there was people who did blackface, and when I would try to confront them about it, they wouldn't even, they felt that I was attacking them, when it wasn't that. It was just that I had already understood what blackface was, and I had to go out of my way in understanding that, versus my teachers. And that person walked around all day at school with not one teacher or principal or anyone talking to him about it. I was the first person who said that to him. And so again, like I mentioned, I think that it's definitely a lack of education, and not in a, like I said, in an elitist way. I would never want to give the perception or make people feel like they're lesser than for being less educated. But I think it is important that we hold our community accountable, and that we're able to have these conversations without people feeling that they're being judged. I think the whole reason why at PSA we wanted to have this podcast was to provide students the tools and the information that they need to begin to understand and to begin to want to explore more about all of these topics that we have. And yeah, I just really want to thank you for sharing these experiences, and I appreciate that both of y'all are here with us.
Thank you.
So I want to ask you, given that, again, the comments, and there's a lot of people who are saying like, oh, well, just go home, like there's no point in any of this. What do you guys think is the importance of local protests?
I would like to make a point just because of what all we've been saying. I feel like a lot of people tend to make the argument that this is a generational problem. And it's not. I mean, it's obviously an educational problem, and generationally, I think our generation is doing quite better. But when we think of generations, we tend to think that maybe like it's the 40-year-olds or the 50-year-olds that are like the loudest and being like against this movement. But if you go to like all these Facebook comments, and even people who I have on my timeline that are like older than me are going against it, they're in their early 30s or late 30s. These are people who would still be classified as millennials, but yet they hold this like very anti-progressive ideas. So it's not a generational movement. It's like an educational group. You don't just have to talk to your parents. You should also talk to your older siblings. You know, they're just like a couple years older than you. They might still hold those ideas that are part of like the Laredo culture.
Yeah, I think what Esayas said as far as education is a great point, because when we learn about Black history in school and you learn about slavery, they're almost taught as like abstract concepts, like, oh, this is so long ago and there's no possible way that this connects to our world today. Just study them like in a vacuum. Let's study them like in these like little bubbles rather than like the whole picture, right? And I think the thing that connects that whole picture is that economic outview. What were the economic consequences of slavery, of sharecropping, of the migration to the urban areas of Black people, and how does that connect to today? And that's what's missing, because that's if we were to teach that, I think the image of injustice for most people, like you say, people who are just either uneducated or ignorant, it would become a lot clearer, and that kind of like systemic injustice would become a lot clearer, and we wouldn't have these kind of like fights, because I think that people, like you say, who have those different perspectives, I imagine that their worldviews and their frameworks by which they're coming to this are completely different than ours. They're completely different because of that kind of like that lack of consciousness almost that it is, which comes from our educational system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think especially when you consider, again, the Laredo bubble, most of the families here are immigrant families. If 1 or 2 generations ago, my parents are first, I'm first gen. So a lot of it also has to do with understanding how racism not only exists in the United States, but globally. And I think that that's why, like we've mentioned, we've seen a lot of protests across the globe. And when you start to consider, okay, well, what does Mexico know about race? And in Mexico, unfortunately, there's a lot of history also with racism, but given that they, in Mexico, have a different approach to understanding and classifying race, I think it becomes a little more blurred. And so I've heard it from my parents where they say, oh, well, in Mexico, we don't have racism, we have classism. But then you say, okay, well, who are the poor people that are being discriminated against? And it's disproportionately the darker skinned people, or the morenos, exactly. And so not only is racism to something that's playing here, but also colorism, and we go into this really broad.
It's the direct consequences of imperialism, right? Because it's not just Mexico, it's all over Africa, it's Southeast Asia. These areas that were colonized now have so deeply integrated into their cultures this idea that clear, light skin is the most beautiful, colored eyes are the most beautiful, straight, long hair is the most beautiful, right? When you have a baby in Mexico who's born with a little dark skin, they go, está medio morenito, right? Like he's a little dark. When it's a baby born with light skin and like blue eyes, it's like, qué bonito, tiene la piel bien clara, mira los ojos. Like it's that kind of like, it's and like you say, they don't even realize that it's racism. They don't even realize that it's that discrimination. because it's so integrated into the culture through colonialism and the aftermath of imperialism. So yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it, and it has a lot to do with what's missing is that self-critique, and what's missing is that education to look beyond what's shown in front of you and to think deeper about the reason things are the way they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like we mentioned, one of the nicer things that we're getting out of all of this, even though we're all, I'm sure, going through uncomfortable conversations and awkward or weird or even sometimes aggressive conversations with our friends and family and loved ones, I think that overall we are seeing a lot more of, we're opening the doors to a place of not only holding police officers accountable for police brutality, but also holding each other accountable for whenever, you know, like growing up, your tias would, for me, my tias, oh, que bonita, que bonita, and I don't know what. And then it, you know, it's uncomfortable, but it's time for us to step in and say, don't say that to me. Don't call me that, because you're perpetuating this system of racism. And like you said, it's all intertwined just historically. And I think this is overall a really big reflection of the lack of acknowledgement of the history, not only of the United States, but like you mentioned, colonialism in general. But given this newfound sense of community and especially support for the Black Lives Matter movement, I just want to know how each of you feel you can take the next steps to continue to help.
All right, so I think I'll let Esayas answer first, because I feel like I've been talking a lot and I don't want to speak over him.
No, you're good. You're good. Oh man, but like I'm still like working on like what can I do next? Okay, I have a lot of voice, I have a lot of support, and what can I do next to make this, you know, not stop? Like, you know, you mentioned it earlier, you know, like not die down. And you know, if, and then when it comes to vote, you know, people are like, you know, they're gonna be slowed down, and then they don't like understand again. But how can we just keep going? That's the plan. I'm still right now working on it, and it's a huge plan, and I don't know yet, but like I want to sit down with my friends. I have a couple of my friends who are like talking about it. What can we do next? Okay, this is a huge victory, and it's a wake up call. It's a beginning, and what's next and stuff like that. Also, so I'm asking that myself, and I want to work on it, and I don't want to stop because, you know, my stomach is like aching. You know, I want to, like, you know, this is what I like. I'm so hyped about, you know, and because I've seen change just like by doing that, and you know, there's still a lot of things going on. You know, I want to show that here and stuff like that too. So.
Right. So I want to ask you also, what are you hopeful to see come out of all of this?
Yeah, just for people just not to be silent. You know, it's enough. Enough is enough to understand that, and you know, those people who are commenting a lot of negative things, that kind of stuff, for them just to open their eyes, for them to be patient, for them, you know, for God to just soften their hearts and ours and stuff like that, and also huge is on the police department, all that kind of, for them to see it also too, you know, just to slow down, you know, before you take your action right away with anger and internet, that kind of stuff. Just, you know, like, what can we do before we hurt somebody, and how can we do this and in the right way? Because, you know, instead of taking somebody's life, or instead of hurting somebody, just to think twice and then just being careful and, you know, stuff like that, you know, like, but yeah, that's that.
Yeah, beautifully said.
For sure. But go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I guess my answer to that is that, you know, with Red Wing, what we're trying to do is that we understand that change is very slow. That change takes effort, change takes time and work. And, you know, it's kind of very frustrating for me to hear people say, well, if you want change, just go vote. Make sure you vote for Democrats. Well, we have been voting for Democrats. We have been voting for decades, and we're still in this very same position. We have to act now. And the way we do that is by, okay, so we have various programs at Red Wing. We do mutual aid, where we find people with different skill sets who are available to then work towards the problems of our community. Like when there was a water crisis, we delivered water to those who had contaminated water with the COVID-19 relief program. Now we're going to be having an AC repair program where we know how we all have like a grandparent, a tío, whose house has no AC, and in the Laredo heat, it's unbearable. It's unbearable both physically and mentally. And so, we're going to be starting a program to fix those ACs or replace them completely, because it's an act of mutual aid that's going to show the community that we're here for one another, that we're here to sustain one another. And so by engaging in those types of actions, you're creating links between people, right? And then once you create those links, they'll be collectivized in a way that will get them to engage with the electoral system in a more successful way, because that way now you have a whole block of people who all have like the same kind of wishes or demands. You have an institution outside of those that already exist that can then kind of put pressure on the electoral system to change those things. So that's what we're trying to do, is build our coalition as big as possible so that we can make it within the interest of those in power to listen to us. Because otherwise, guess what? We're going to actually vote them out and get someone in there who will work for us. So that's our long-term plan as far as that goes.
Right, and I think it's very important to emphasize how the Black Lives Matter movement isn't a partisan issue. It's not you vote blue or you vote red. At Political Science Association, we're very passionate about students engaging with civically and voting, but we do acknowledge that the Black Lives Matter movement itself and overall what we've seen people trying to do isn't necessarily something that is solved with voting blue or voting red, because there's not a blue Black Lives Matter movement and a red Black Lives Matter movement. It's just the Black Lives Matter movement. And so even though we definitely value voting, I think at least in this specific movement, voting isn't at the core of what they're trying to do. As we've heard with all of y'all, I think it's very clear that education is one of the biggest factors that can help us all here. But I just want to thank you guys so much for joining us, for sharing all of these beautiful comments and for doing the work that you're doing. It's very nice to see the community coming together. And just gonna ask you guys if you have any last comments for us, for TAMIU students, or for any Laredoans that are listening.
Just some last words. Thank you all for having us. It's been a pleasure. A very productive conversation, I feel. It's a pleasure meeting all of you, Esayas, Cecilia,
Alex.
This is Consuelo. I got confused, but Alex.
She's our president.
Great. Thank you very much for hosting us. Thank you for giving us a platform. And yeah, if anyone is interested in joining the fight towards change, hit us up on social media, Red Wing United on Facebook and Instagram. And those are my last thoughts. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, also same thing. Thank you guys for all of you for hosting this and for spreading our words to the community and stuff like that. We need this. We need more stuff like this, just to speak, not to be afraid. And I'm so excited for just what's gonna happen in the future and to act like right now. Like I said, we need to act right now, and we can't stay silent anymore. And we thank you very much.
Well, yeah, thank you all for joining us. We appreciate your time so much. And if anybody wants to get involved, we're going to go ahead and include links anywhere around the video. And yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Appreciate you guys. And this was another episode of Border Talks. Bye.
Appreciate you.
Bye. Thank you guys. See you guys.